The Montgomery County Board of Education special call meeting Thursday, September 13, 2018 is now called to order. We do have a quorum with all members in attendance. We need a motion at this time to approve the agenda.
Mr. President, I move that we adopt the September 13th agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and properly second that we adopt the agenda as printed. Any discussion? Those who are in favor, let's see by show of hands. It is unanimous. First item on our agenda is receive as information, Advanced Ed Consulting Services, Statement of Work, Dr. Burnett Nettles.
Good evening. You have before you a copy of a consulting services statement of agreement for Advanced Ed. You've seen this agreement before, a couple weeks ago, when we were doing our Elliott Suites, our observation visits on August 30th. The success rate of those visits was so impressive. The data that's being received from those visits will help drive PD in those 15 schools and across the district. And we've had principals to request that those visits happen in their buildings because they want to take advantage of outside forces being in our buildings to see what's going on and to provide that data. We're able to provide and increase the capacity of our principals by training them on their Elliott observation instrument and then allowing them to do visits in the schools. So the data and the residual effects of those visits are actually twofold. We're training our principals, we're allowing them to have impact in not only their buildings, but other buildings as well. And then we have that expert attention for our district. So we've determined that what we need to do is do the other schools also, and they will be done in 2 sweeps, one on September 20th and the other on October 16th. So the cost of each Elliott sweep is $3,000, and that's why the document is for a $6,000 cost. Yes, ma'am.
Can we not see the data?
The data is still being compiled, so as soon as all of the data is compiled, that will be provided to the board.
But Brenda, what you're saying is you're coming in here with all this good news, which is great. I mean, that's where, it's just, it's not that I'm not taking you at your word, but I just would like to see the data. And you can say it's not compiled yet, and I'm like, how do we, it's like we're serving the steak and not seeing how we got to that steak. Does that make sense?
I guess, Dr. Mills, could you give us an idea of what it is that the principals are so excited about with the suite?
Yes, ma'am. With the Elliott observation instrument, the Elliott observation instrument measures student observables.
Right.
So if the teacher practice is working effectively, then students are engaged in their work. They are able to take that work and implement it as a real life scenario. They're able to do the research on their own in order to come to appropriate outcomes with their instruction. So it allows us to see whether or not our instruction is not just like at that level 1, but whether or not it goes beyond and addresses more standard-based aligned outcomes.
And
Am I making sense?
also, if I might add, the first one that we did a week or so ago only covered a certain number of schools, 15 schools. And so if we're able to do this contract, we'll be able to cover the remaining schools, and then we'll be able to gather the same kind of information so that we can share it, not only among ourselves here, but also out in the schools, so that they, as part of their leadership teams and their transformation and their observations, will be able to say, this is what we saw when we did the sweeps, and we look for student engagement. So everybody now will have the information as opposed to only 15 schools.
Dr. Moore, so when we do receive all of that information, will then you be able to judge, thank you, Dr. Butler, maybe master teachers or, I understand what that is, where the making sure the students are engaged, but in order for students to be engaged in the learning, most of the time that means you've got a really good teacher that knows how to engage the students. So is there going to be a way where we can then, or y'all can use that to show teachers that maybe aren't having that student engagement, be able to see how.
Yes,
model it.
I think that's one piece of it, where we have a teacher that shows up maybe at even one of our more traditional schools who's really doing an outstanding job with student engagement. So that person can be used to even do some of the professional development or become a model so that other teachers can learn to a higher level about how you're supposed to work to engage students. Also, we can use that information to help us as we determine maybe by school how much professional development is needed and in what arena. And I think also in advanced ed, we'll have some information where an individual has actually gone in and said, this is what this really means. This is what we're looking for, and show it to a teacher and say, if you want to actually be a teacher who engages students, these are the kinds of things you need to do.
Okay. Thank you.
And for me, I'd like to see, I mean, I see it, but for me, I'd like to know what schools, what were the components. I just don't know enough about this.
You want more information
I
on
want
what the
more
Elliott
information.
instrument looks like and what
Right, yeah.
what are the measures?
Right.
And also understanding, everyone, that the people who do the sweeps, who do the Elliott observations, have been trained in what you look for when you go into the classroom. So it's not just someone walking in and making marks. These people have been trained on how to use the Elliott instrument.
The 36-page preliminary report that we got, where did that data come from?
That did not, some of it had Elliott's in it, not a whole lot though, but a part of it was documentation, interviews. When they came in, they did several different ways of gathering information. So Elliott was not the only thing, but they did do a few Elliott's in one or two, maybe how many schools, 4 or 5? When they did the Elliott's before with about 5 schools. So then they also had interviews, they interviewed board members, they interviewed staff members, and so they had several different ways of collecting information for that special review. This is just more of collecting data about student engagement and how a teacher in a classroom is delivering instruction and how engaged the students are in it, or whether or not they're just sitting there listening to someone lecture.
This one had about 10 different classifications in a class. I think it had a numerical number on it.
I think
On the Elliott, you have 4, I believe.
but the page you're talking about had different colors, because there were 3 sections in the report, and in those 3 sections were the different indicators for each domain, and they were all color-coded. And that's the page you're talking about towards front. Yes, sir, those are the Elliott scores from that special engagement review. It's
It'd be
towards the front of the document.
Yeah, it'd be a 1.95 or something.
The indicators there are 3 domains for the advanced ed structure for this cycle: leadership, resources, and learning. And within those 3 domains are about 12 indicators for each item. So each one of those indicators that you're talking about, 1.9, had a different score, and that score was developed based on what the observation was in that classroom. Once every person scored their document, and then those scores were tallied to create that, we call it a Christmas tree because it's multicolored, that document. Am I answering your question?
Yes, ma'am. My question was, how in the world can you be that definitive on all that many things that are going on in a classroom that you can put a number to? I mean, it just seemed, to me, it was like you're grading Auburn's football team and you're gonna give them a score if all the jerseys are tucked in.
Well, it's almost like if you see it to a certain level, then you use that scoring. But you have to be trained. Not everybody can just walk in and do it. So our people have been trained in the use of the Elliott, and so they know what to look for when they go into a classroom.
But I will get you a copy of this.
Okay? All right, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And if I'm not,
Did you have something?
if I'm correct or not about this, let me know. But when the special review team comes back in December,
Yes, ma'am.
they will conduct Elliott's if we have not already done them.
That's correct.
So we can do a lot of this ourselves, so that when they come back, they may not have to do as many or at all when they come back.
That's correct, because what they're looking for is whether or not we have taken the data and started creating professional development activities based on what we're able to determine in the classroom.
So what do you think, since we're meeting, what, in a week or two? I mean, we got another meeting, if you would just come back with more data, you know, so we could, you know, so there'd be more substance. So, that's tabling this until it's just an idea.
Dr. Nettles, I just have a quick question, if you're finished. So with the if I'm teaching, let's just say I'm teaching chemistry, we're gonna drink.
Oh, right.
And,
It's a big thing.
and so they come in and they assess me, am I gonna be able, as that chemistry teacher, look to say, hey, your students are engaged, or they're not so, I mean, are the teachers themselves gonna get feedback?
Not immediately.
Okay,
The idea is to find out where the students are in terms of what that engagement looks like, but it's bigger than just the term engagement. Whether or not the instruction that's being delivered actually creates an opportunity for students to have a larger outcome than just the sit and get and the drill and kill. So when you look at the data per school or per content area, then you're able to determine where globally we need to create professional development activities. If you get to a point where you need to drill down to a teacher in the actual Elliott engine, you can, not in this particular process.
okay.
But if you can create opportunities for growth for teachers, for content areas, for, just for the school as a whole, then you can begin to pull the school's growth ahead, further along, because you can target where those gaps are. So
So this is
eventually
the-
we're going to get to the teacher, but this is really about a student observable. What are the students doing? Because if the students are on task and are engaged and interpretive, then the teacher instruction and teacher practice has happened.
And Dr. Nels, this is akin to what we used to have back in the good old days when we had supervisors. Supervisors were trained to go in a classroom and could tell when teaching was taking place and when learning was teaching and learning was taking place. So if you have people that are doing the Elliots, they have been trained to do this. And they can walk in the classroom and tell if it's being done or if they're just feeding them information back and forth. It's just like the supervisors
agree.
back then. They just gave it a fancy name.
Well,
Let me ask a question.
sure.
On the first set of Elliots that were done by Advanced Ed, you said there were 5 schools involved or something like that?
In March,
Whenever,
approximately 5.
okay. Now, based on Dr. Keith's request, is it possible for that 5, the data from that, to be put together so that we could see what it is we will see?
You have the data from that because it's in the special review report.
Okay.
Yes,
That's what I was
ma'am.
talking
That's,
about.
that data
That's
exists.
what Lee is talking
Yes,
about.
ma'am.
Okay.
Must have.
Yes, ma'am. It's in the special report, it's in the first, I want to
That's
say,
what
within
you
the
got
first
it
10
on.
pages.
I've read that,
What date?
I've read that, I mean, I didn't bring it, but
It was
I've
a
read that,
report.
they were really
I
three
remember
times.
You
I
remember
got
the
mine
pages
on
that
file
look
by
like
dates.
color light bulbs, it's
Right,
red.
the red,
Those are the results of an Elliott review.
okay, and I get
Okay.
that, but,
Okay.
and I'm buying that, but you're telling us that you went into a school, this is what I don't know, okay, I'm just telling you this as a teacher, okay, you know, I'm still a teacher, I've been teaching almost 40 years,
Yes,
okay?
ma'am.
You and I both know that somebody can come to your door, no matter who they are, they can have a suit and tie on, and your kids are like, okay. And that's, I wanna know the components. Did they raise their hand? I just wanna know, were there questions? I wanna know more about, I know what the advanced ed said, and you can, y'all are missing the point here, and I guess it looks like I argue with the wall, but I'm not getting what I want. I wanna know what schools, how many students, what engagement you were talking about? Were they at the chalkboard? Were they asking questions? Were they writing? Was there a PowerPoint? That's what I wanna know, you know, and that, you know, that's what I wanna know. I don't, if you're telling me you gave us red, green, and yellow, hello, I know the 3 components. I've memorized it almost. So that's not what I'm looking for. We got that. That's an advanced ed report.
So what can be done is once I provide you with the report, I can show you glimpses of the training. If that will help you see what that document actually looks for and determines. And then that very well may help you kind of see. the
Okay,
larger picture.
but do you understand what you, this is not, I'm not trying to attack you, but you said,
I know.
we did great. Show me great. Show me great.
Well, that, it doesn't mean that we did great.
Could I, Mr. President, could I suggest something? In as much as Dr. Keith is having difficulty understanding, she wants something different from what the rest of us. Could you have a meeting with her?
Yes, ma'am.
And just the two of you sit
Yes,
down
ma'am.
and you explain this
Show
A
her.
to Z and show her how you all came up with that? Because I think the majority of us, I think we understand.
Okay, Mary, Mary, she just said it was, y'all saw it. Okay, hello. It was totally red and yellow. We have one green. How's that great?
But I don't think, so. Well,
Whether it's great or
it doesn't
not,
mean
that's
it's
not
great.
my
Dr.
point.
Keith.
I think what we are missing here is the fact that during this report, we are supposed to show growth
Yes,
in terms of all those that were identified.
yes.
So certainly, if you're keeping record in terms of what we're doing to address each of those items, then certainly there should be some growth
Yes.
at the end of the cycle. And that will be presented to us in December. But right now, as we move along, we are following the process in order to get there. So certainly, these things, in terms of red, blue, green, well, we're talking about whether or not we're moving forward with respect to meeting all of those things that were identified with respect to that advanced ed report.
Yes, sir. Just one more thing. I think I may have linked my words together in a way that allowed you to think that the results were great. When I say the results were great, I'm talking about the process. The process was so well done, and everybody wants to see that process happen in their buildings because they want to have access to that same kind of data. So, you're right, if the document is 2/3 red and one green, that does not necessarily lend itself to great results.
Okay.
But the residual of that is that now I have something to look at in my building so that I can begin to provide professional development. And that's what the principals want. They want that opportunity to see where our gaps are so that we can begin to move forward.
Gotcha.
Does that
Now,
help?
it clarifies it.
There you go.
Okay, gotcha.
Does the
Thank you,
school
Doctor.
know the day it's gonna be assessed? Do they have any advance warning?
Sir?
Does the school know ahead of time that these folks are coming to grade us today?
For the sweeps that we're doing right now, yes, they do know that we're coming. It's a regular instructional day. No
But-
moves, no dances, it's a regular
Yeah,
instructional.
but remember, this is about student engagement, so unless the teacher is a really great facilitator, you're not gonna see a lot of student engagement. You're probably gonna see a teacher lecturing and saying, turn the page, whatever in the book. But a great facilitator will actually be doing things that will help the students become more engaged in the learning process, if that makes sense.
Can I add one thing, Mr. President? Just for the board, I went on the state website to see what their standards of student engagement looks like. So I would advise, like for you, Lisa, just to download, I'll give you the website, and it'll show you what they consider student engagement. And I'm pretty sure it's aligned, I guess, with the Elliott and Advanced Ed standards. I think it even mentioned that, but just to kind of help you out.
Okay, again, thank you, Dr. Nettles. At this time, item number 5, discussion of the FY 2019 budget hearing 2. Mr. Arthur Wise.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board, Dr. Moore. And we also like to thank the public for coming out and joining in with us for our second budget hearing. And as I stated before, most of you probably already know that the law requires that we present 2 budget hearings before the public. And of course, these hearings are for the benefit of the public, so we do encourage public input. In fact, in the very last page of your book, you should have something called a suggestion form. So if you have any questions or want to make any comments or need us to get back with you, just write it on that form, turn it in to us, and we'll certainly answer your question. In fact, if you have any questions, we normally will put those questions on the website along with the answers. Also, after the end of this presentation, we'll open the floor up first to board members if they have any questions, and then to the public. And so you may feel free to ask questions then as well. The board members, I apologize that you have to go through this, look at this again. I think after the first time, it's usually somewhat challenging the second time. But I also understand that you have an engagement that you have to be at, so I'm gonna try to get through it as quickly as possible.
Could you first just do whatever those changes were?
Yes, ma'am.
Because I don't see the necessity to go over everything, but if you could, whatever those changes were when you check with the state, could we get that?
Sure, yes. Again, this is our second budget hearing. We had the first budget hearing on Tuesday, September the 11th. As we stated before, our budget process is both interactive and inclusive. We have conversations with department heads, we talk with the principals, we talk with community leaders. We always want input before we present a budget or before we do a budget. Of course, we stated that we certainly want public input, but we also want you to know that there are things that we have to be mindful of as well. One of those things is budget constraints. And as we prepare our household budget, we know we can't spend what we don't have. There are also numerous agencies in which we must live within their guidelines. The U.S. Department of Education, the Alabama State Legislature, Alabama State Department of Education, and the board members had discussed already advanced ed. So all of these entities or entities that provide policies and procedures related to our receiving funds. We also receive certain funds from the state of Alabama that requires us to match in order to participate in those particular funding sources. For example, you got the state's foundation program, which is the largest source of funds for Montgomery County schools. But in order to participate in the state's foundation program, in which we will receive about $150 million, we will have to put up basically almost $25 million. Also, we'll receive about $8 or $9 million in what is called state capital purchase dollars. We have to put up over $2 million to participate in that program. And of course, Ms. Brown, those are the two changes that were made. The state foundation program match, it was $24,100,000 and something thousand. As you see now, that match is $24,600,000 and something thousand. Therefore, we had to take some of our own allocated local revenues and move those revenues up into the match. Therefore, that left us with a $400,000 gap, which was added to the deficit. I changed these slides around a little bit because I wanted us to address these challenges first. And as we see, Montgomery, these are challenges as I see them thus far. I'm sure we have a lot of other challenges, but as it relates to funding, Montgomery County provides a minimum allowable rate of ad valorem taxes for education. And that's something that I'm going to talk about a little bit more in just a second. The district enrollment continues to decline as it has consistently since 2014. And of course, that has a negative impact on funding. Now I'll talk about that a little bit later too. Our current fund is not adequate to meet the demands of our instructional programming. And we have some serious building renovations. In fact, I was sitting there by our operations director. He was just telling me, Mr. Watts, we got some roofing problems throughout this district. We have other chiller problems and other maintenance problems throughout the district. How are we going to pay for these things? Or how are we going to fix these things? So we have numerous challenges that we'll have to address. So there are funding needs for our district. And again, the cost of goods and services are continuing to increase while revenues have remained stagnant or in some cases have declined. it's almost like, I think Mr. Porterfield mentioned that we hadn't had an ad valorem tax rate for education since 1970. Well, could you imagine running your household based on the 1970 income? Well, in many instances, that's what this school district is asked to do. And so we really have to look at that. And there we see our student ADM, the decline over the last several years. We are truly concerned about this ADM decline because we had our data person looked at our number of student enrollment as of yesterday, September 12, 2018. As of yesterday, our enrollment was 28,557 students. That's 920 students lower than the ADM that we have currently. So that means, because we're funded based on student enrollment, that means for 2020, that could cost us anywhere probably between $3 to $5 million. So we continually see this reduction in funding, no increase in local support. So what do we do? And I'll continue to ask that question.
Excuse me.
Yes, sir.
We seek to get an increase in local support. And that's basically the only way that we're going to sustain ourselves. Now, we can move and talk about getting rid of central office. It's not going to do anything in terms of adjusting this budget to where it needs to be. You can get rid of every principal and everybody else that tends to be with this stuff. It's not going to impact this budget unless we get an increase in local support. Now, it is my understanding, and I think article came out in the paper on this morning that I think Andrew had something to do with that. That dealt with a comparative analysis of districts of our size, 20,000 or greater. Just 20,000 students or greater, where we are at 2029. And when you make that comparative analysis, you'll find that Montgomery County, even with the lowest of the ones that are listed here of all the county, we tend to support even half of what the lowest tend to give toward local support. Now, we're concerned about how we're going to do this, how we're going to meet these challenges. It is my understanding that last week, I think the council had some budget challenges also. And with those budget challenges, without listening or having any input from the public, they were able to increase gasoline tax. Not only that, they were also able to increase the fees for garbage, okay? Now, it is my understanding that the county commission, recognizing the situation that we're in, financial, and everybody says that we're trying to do all we can to help children in this district. Well, if we are, let's start spending money where the mouth is. Because it's my understanding, without even a vote having to be taken, that the county commission can increase the millage to at least 6 meals without having to go through a vote. So if we could get that 6 meals, and I look at and do a proportion with respect to what the millage is bringing in now, and look at that 6%, it would be more than enough at this point in time to balance this budget. So we need to, and I would suggest Dr. Moore, Mr. Rowe, and this board as a whole, let us get together, write a letter to the county commission, ask them to move on that millage increase. Let's ask them to move on the millage increase to help these children and the people who tend to provide those services. Now, meanwhile, you get kickbacks. Well, we're not going to help a school system that's failing, but if you don't help us while we're failing, we don't need you to help us when we go forward. That's one thing we need to send that message out. And as we move forward and get this money in place and someone have a balanced budget and show the progress that has been made, at that point in time, I believe we can send it to the people, because The future and the state of public education will rest in the hands of those parents and the children who attend public schools in Montgomery. So we need to move in terms of asking the county commissioners to do the same as what the city council did in supporting Montgomery Public Schools.
Mr. Watts, you were not here, when this took place. The county commissioners collected 1% sales tax for Montgomery Public Schools. But they decided, among themselves that they would withhold $2 million from us. And they had already collected 1% sales tax for MPS to dole out among their district. So if they're going to collect 1% sales tax, then they should at least give back to the system. But you were not here, and you were not apprised of that. But if you're gonna collect it for the system, give it to the system. You know, it's not your decision, the taxpayers paid that, not the county commissioner.
Yes, ma'am.
But if you don't trust the system, and the county commission, not speaking for them, does not trust the system, and I honestly, I give kudos to the fact that they didn't give us this money. No, everything that was supposed to happen, from, from the closing of Fairwinds, from cutting down central office, and let's just throw that in the corner and forget I said that, because I sound like a broken record. Let's add something new, and it may be a little upsetting, but when you look at this budget, and I looked at this budget, I went through and I put my little stamps all over the place, and let me explain something, okay? Because we're looking at the whole system, not the smaller parts of the system. If we look at most of our schools, we have 400 to 1,700, okay? But when you look at these schools, we have Pentlala with 142, we have Dunbar Raymer with 170, we have South Lawn Elementary with 250, we have Hughes with 54. Now, I'm not trying to say close schools, but I want you to think about that small numbers. What are we spending in utilities? What are we spending in busing these kids all the way to Dunbar? What are we spending in maintenance? What are we spending in, forget, I haven't even mentioned the principals or the teachers. That, when we close Georgia Washington, that has 400 and some students, and we have these schools with 142, 170, 250, I'm sure these parents would want to kill me right now, because I'd be happy if my child was at a school with 170. I feel like was at a little private school, okay? But we are looking at being 9 million in the hole. And when we look at that, that is something that gets my attention, and it should get everybody else's attention.
May I interject,
Yes, please.
please? We're right now, as we're discussing, we're coming up with solutions which prevent Mr. Watts from going over where we stand now with the budget. So at some point, as we said the other day, we're gonna have to come up with some kind of plan that will help us address the issues that are now very real in our budget. And so tonight, we can't come up with the solutions, because there will be all kinds of things that we possibly could do down the road, and as a board and superintendent, that's what we will have to address. But right now, for the sake of what he has to do, he has to review the budget so that we can go through it, and then he can make his recommendations or whatever. We can't really come up with the solutions tonight.
Mr. President, I just would like to make a comment, in regard, Dr. Keith, I understand what you're saying, but you also have to understand too, well, first of all, Hughes is an alternative school. So that's not really a true traditional school. But county schools do cost more. I don't know if you've ever been to Dunbar, Raymer, or Pentlala, but those children, they live in the very deep parts of our county, and Dunbar Raymer has been one of my schools for almost 12 years now. And when we had those children, it's a K-8 school, and when they went to Georgia Washington for 1 year for 9th grade before we did 9th through 12th grade, and then they went to usually Jeff Davis or Carver, those kids, a lot of them ended up dropping out. They need to go to school in their communities where they live. And so I understand your concerns, and your point is well taken, but we also have to remember that these are children. They're our future, and they need to stay in their communities.
We have
And-
students right now that we took out of Goodwin that are traveling by bus all the way out to Dunbar-Reamer right now.
I was against
Oh, yeah.
selling Georgia
That's
Washington,
right.
because I fully understand
Yeah.
the need for keeping our kids in their communities. So I'm going to stop there, but I just think we need to be very mindful that not always is it dollars. We're talking about children and lives.
Yeah.
But, and we also, and your point's well taken, and I appreciate you saying that, but, we're up here to make business decisions, not emotional decisions.
Children are our business, and
But I
certainly
think-
it's not, it shouldn't be emotional, but children are our business, and we should look out for the best interests of children. And as you have stated,
And
ma'am,
in 9
the
million in
southern-
debt,
the
how
s-
can we do
The
that?
southern tier of Montgomery County, these children have suffered for years. And reason being is because we don't have the facilities there to service them with respect to the education. That's why they drop out, because of the long distances they have to travel when they get older. But when they're young, and you say 100 some odd children, if we did not serve those children would have anywhere to go except for within the city, which would be long, very long drives for them. We understand that. So with that,
Interesting.
and certainly, hopefully, we won't impact them negatively anymore in the southern tier of those county schools. So at this time, would you please?
I will say my dissertation was on dropouts, and not not one excuse of how far they traveled was in it.
This
That
is
must be
something,
something
I believe
2018.
that you have done extensive research on that, haven't
On
you?
dropouts, yes.
Lee?
Mr. Chairman, may I please interrupt?
Yeah.
Mr. Watts, can we please continue with the presentation, sir?
Thank you.
Yes, sir. Of course, all school districts operate on basically 5 different funds. First, there's the general fund that really accounts for the general operations of the school district. This would include your state funds, just a smidgen of federal dollars, and the grand majority of your local dollars, such as your sales tax, property taxes, which is what our board members are speaking of now. We also see our 8 levels of expenditures: instructional services, which speaks to the interaction between the teachers and students. Those instructional services expenditures are mainly the salary and benefits of our teachers. Instructional support services are mainly the salary and benefits of our principals, assistant principals, counselors, librarians, and any other individual that provides support to the teachers or to the principals in supporting that student. Course operation and maintenance is concerned with the general operations of the school district, basically keeping the buildings both safe and secure. So that would include basically the maintenance department, the custodians throughout the district. It also would include all of the utilities throughout the district. Auxiliary services are basically transportation services. So all of our bus drivers, mechanics, would be part of auxiliary services. Now, we also see auxiliary services under the special revenue fund source. That would be mainly child nutrition or the feeding of the students. Of course, and I'll talk about special revenue in just a second. General administrative are basically the expenditures related to the forming the policies and administrative function of the district.
Arthur,
Yes, sir.
there's operations and maintenance, don't we contract for waste disposal with some private concern?
Yes, I do think a private organization picks up the garbage and so forth, the waste.
Do you know how much that's spent in?
I can get that for you. I don't have it broken down right now, but I definitely, in fact, I can give you the electricity, the garbage and all of it, gas and so forth.
Well, the city has a sanitation department, why don't they help us?
That's something we can look at.
Yeah, I put it out 2 times a month and it cost me $27.
Yeah. Actually, we had waste service through the city years ago, but they charged us for their services.
Well, what I'm saying is, if they want to help the
And what
schools,
we elected to do, we did a cost comparison by taking proposals from the business community of the market, and your contractual services that we procure are actually we saved $150,000, $180,000 is right, you like to be up around this. Versus what we were paying the city of Montgomery at the time.
Where's their general heart?
Well, as someone stated earlier, we have to make a sound financial business decision.
I understand that, I'm just saying, if the mayor's all gung ho for schools, then put your money where your mouth is.
And I'll make a couple of statements about local, and hopefully I won't get anything started, but I will make another statement about local support in just a second as well, because I do think it's important. In fact, it's extremely important. Other expenditures, would be mainly expenditures related to after-school tutoring. These are expenditures that are not related to, normal day school. In fact, pre-K would be, deemed a other expenditure. Although those pre-K students do attend school during the daytime, but in Alabama, education is deemed K through 12. So pre-K would be deemed other expenditure. Other fund uses are basically transfers in and transfers out mainly. Our general fund is required to provide or pay the benefits of our child nutrition department, which is in the special revenue fund.
Mr. President, if I may, going back to pre-K,
Yes, ma'am.
is it every time we take on a pre-K in our schools, it costs, am I correct? Or how does that work?
Let me just say this. The first year, the state usually fund around $150,000, pretty much kind of cover the cost of pre-K. But the next year and thereon, it's anywhere probably between $97,000 to $100,000. So there, the federal programs will have to pick up that additional cost, and general fund will have to pick up the additional cost. We see that in the general fund, and this is the point we want to make, in the general fund, we see excess of revenues over expenditures, or in this case, expenditures over revenues of about $9.7 million. And that's where our concern is. We're looking at a potential deficit of almost $10 million that we are going to have to address. Of course, we are projected to begin the year of 2019 with about $19 million, and that will end the year with about $9 million.
So then that's about half of what our reserve, unreserved balance.
That's correct. Yes, ma'am.
So, Mr. Watts, what happened last year? Did we ever get to that point where we knew where our unreserved balance for this past fiscal year is?
Yes, ma'am. Right now, unreserved balance is probably about $24 million right now, but we still got to pay the remaining expenditures for the month of September, including payroll, which is the largest expenditure. And of course, when I do the financial statement for the month of August, I'll talk about what their unreserved fund balance is at that time.
Right, okay. I just wanted to see comparatively this time last year,
Oh, okay.
September of 2017, where
Where it
we
was
were.
compared to
Yes,
this year?
sir.
Okay,
Yes, sir.
I'll get
Yes,
that for
sir.
you. Yes. In fact, I think that's a great question. Before I move on to the general fund, let me just speak to you about these other funds. Special revenue fund are basically our federal dollars. That's what the makeup of our special revenue fund is. Title I, Title II, child nutrition dollars, or the majority of dollars in our special revenue fund. That $5.4 million that says local revenues under special revenue, those are basically local school dollars. And these are dollars that maybe the local school raise through fundraisers or admissions to basketball games or football games and concessions, those type of things. Of course, those expenditures would be the same as I described: instructional services, basically teacher salaries and benefits, instructional support services, principals, assistant principals, counselors, librarians, and all of those that help support that process. Operation and maintenance, of course, keeping our buildings both safe, secure, and comfortable. Auxiliary services under special revenue, again, would be child nutrition services. Junior administrative, we all know what that is. Other expenditures, we just talked about the pre-K, and tutoring and so forth.
On the, the 9,282,820.
Yes, ma'am.
Gladys, would you explain that, because it's in red, on, of course, I'm looking, I didn't get home to get my packet today, I was still at work.
Which one?
The one the slide you just had, go to the gallery where you have
Oh, right here.
9,282,820.
92, okay, yes, ma'am. That was a transportation, that's transportation cost.
So why on that other one was it red? Why did you make that red?
Let me see, let me remember, which one is that?
It,
The next one, the next slide?
it could, well, maybe I'm on the wrong here.
Let me see which one.
It's this one right here.
Oh, this was the deficit, in the first presentation right here.
Okay, okay.
That was the deficit in the first presentation, but then you added that 400,000 that,
Back and then it's not.
yeah, so 9.7 million.
The only reason I asked was it was the same, the 9282, the same on here.
Yes, ma'am.
I got you.
Debt service fund is basically, the payment of long-term debt. And basically, we just transfer money from capital projects fund to debt service to pay our principal and the interest debt. Of course, one of those debts is coming out, Mr. Porter reminded me in 2020, so we're very happy about that. What I'm sad about though is that we may have to get some more debt though to build these schools and to finance some of these things that Mr. Chad Anderson was just speaking of. Capital Projects Fund, basically the building and renovations of schools. Expendable Trust Fund is basically our non-public school activity funds, such as the SGA club, money that the SGA club may raise, or the FFA club may raise, or any type of club at the schools in which those monies would be specifically expended and raised by those particular clubs. We see our total revenues in the general fund of about $287 million. When I look at that, we see general fund, we see the $221 million total of $287 million, in which special revenue is about $53 million, but total revenue is about $287. I want to get to the other slide before I talk about that. This is the one I want to talk about. We see out of the $221 million, you'll receive about $54 million of that are local revenues. That's about 25% of the total general fund revenues. And I wanted to go to this slide here, about 24.7%. And hopefully I'm not,
Say what you got to say.
okay, hopefully I'm not, creating a situation, but I did think it was important though to compare the percentage of our local revenue compared to some of these other districts. And Mr. President, I have to say to you that Huntsville City Schools, $102 million in local revenue. Know how many students they have? 23,000. We have 28,000.
We are underfunded local.
And we got 54,000. So 54 million. So something is wrong with that. And I do know that maybe we made some mistakes and we'll admit those mistakes and we'll do better. But we do need some assistance. I also looked at Birmingham City schools.
Arthur, we have the former Huntsville City Superintendent. Did she bring us a check?
Can't use local funds. come on,
30
man,
seconds
from them.
of that will be that the locals, I think Huntsville has 26.5 million.
We're
City
still,
council
we're,
gives a donation.
as long as we remain at the minimum that the state requires to even participate in the foundation program, we will forever faced with, budget challenges. But we'll be faced with budget challenges next year. The only funding that is stable for funding public education is through ad valorem taxes. That's the only stable funding you got. You cannot rely on sales taxes because that thing goes up and down, it fluctuates. The only stable means of funding public education is through ad valorem taxes, as you are presenting with those other districts now.
And so Birmingham City Schools, how many students do they have as relates to their ADM? 23,262. Montgomery, 28,000. Amount of local revenues for Montgomery, 54 million, as you see, 723. Amount of local revenues for Birmingham, 97 million, 856. So we see that these districts almost double the amount that we're receiving here in Montgomery. Yes, there's some things that we have to do better, Mr. President, but we need additional support.
Amen.
We have to have additional support.
We're trying for a long time.
And there's some things that we'll do more efficiently. We will. I talked with Dr. Moore. She wants to do. She just believes in doing the right thing. If we make a mistake, then we're going to admit it. But we do need additional support.
One thing, Mr. President, if I may, it almost looks like Montgomery Public Schools is on state welfare. And it's not, like, most of our funding comes from that. And when you look at the local revenue that you mentioned, that the other states are bringing in, the other cities are bringing in the school districts, there's an interest, even in Florida, there's no perfect school system, no perfect school board, but there's investment in the children. So when you read comments that we're not going to support Montgomery Public School System, well, because of the board, you punish the children. You're not punishing this board, you're punishing the people that will continue to make this city thrive. So when you say no to us, that's fine, it doesn't hurt me, but it does hurt the children that we do serve, and I just want to put that out there.
And if I just have to add this, and I think I'm speaking for a good bit of the public that would not buy into raising taxes. They don't know and don't feel, and some of the board members, other than me on this board, have said it at least to me, we don't know that the children are getting the money. And that, the lack of trust from your public in seeing the same people do the same things since 2011 in the same spots, they're angry, and I'm angry for them. They see it for what it is, and they're never gonna buy into it until they see what I've said at every meeting. We have too much friends and family. We're not Birmingham. We've gotta gut some things. And it's just.
Mr. Chairman, we're in the solution phase again.
Yeah.
And we continue
Let's
with the
move on.
presentation.
Yes, please. We're
I'm
getting
not
close
trying to
to-
get, I'm giving y'all facts that you're not listening to.
I think in your budget report, you do show how every penny is spent, don't you? And everybody else had access to the money being spent in this district. You do have that.
Yes. And
Okay,
we're
thank you.
gonna even be more, open about
Thank you.
all of our expenditures.
That's
I think
true.
we need to do that. I do want the public, to trust what we're doing and what we're saying. And as I stated, if we make a mistake, then we will admit that. And of course, and hopefully, you'll understand and we'll keep moving on. But, that still doesn't alleviate the fact that we do need local support.
Thank you.
Our system ADM, again, actually, I said 28,000, 29,476. You see, the number of teachers that we earn based on those, units earned. We're losing almost 50 units for 2019. We see we're losing a total unit amount of about 48 teacher units for the year of 2019.
Okay, if you would stay there on that slide, right there with the teachers, okay? This is, and I understand that we had, I'm wondering, is this the raises that the principals got? Because I don't think it will be the 2.5% raises that the teachers got, because that just happened.
Right.
If you look, and I want you to look at February, it's kind of confusing because you're looking at 19 and then you got 18.
Right.
We had 1709 teachers right now. Last year we had 758. So y'all actually took out 49 teachers basically, okay? I did the math on that, okay? And I just said, let's say they all had bachelors. I came up with $2,143,946. We should say that. Yet it doesn't say that at all. It says, if you look at it, that we actually, if you look at it down here on the salaries, on your next slide, when you do the next slide, it says we went up.
Okay.
How did we lose
Let me explain
that
that.
many teachers and go up 558,000?
Yes,
I
ma'am.
think he explained that the other night with the 2.5 raise for the.
That 2.5 raise just happened.
Right. But
That just
This
happened.
is
Okay.
projected.
this budget is projected for 2019, so it includes the 2.5%.
And is that 2 million? And that's all I wanna hear, is that 2 million?
Yes, it's actually a little bit more than
Okay,
2
is it?
million.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
And also, I think if I'm correct on this, the foundation units are what we're talking about.
Yes, ma'am.
And we lost
Yes.
our foundation, which is what the state gives us.
Right.
That's what we lost in our reductions.
Right, that's correct.
Which means the state won't give us the money for that many people, because we don't have them anymore, those units.
Right, that's correct. Okay, we see that the amount that is budgeted for salaries and benefits, for fiscal year 2019, we see $558,000 for salaries and negative $69,154 for benefits. Now, we do know that because we lost all those 50 teacher units, we lost money. And Dr. Keith brought up an interesting point, that if we lost money because of a loss of teacher units, then why are we showing an increase in salaries? Well, that, as Dr. Moore just stated, was because of that 2.5% raise. The 2.5% raise district-wide, I think it's gonna be around $4 point some million, if I'm not mistaken. So that's why you do see that increase in salaries on this particular slide. We also see that the state, and even other current expenses, we see a minus there, but pretty much would expect to see a plus there too because of the 2% raise. Because other current expenses also include our classified support employees, such as our custodians, our bookkeepers, accountants, secretaries. All of those are included in other current expenses. So, but for us to show a minus, then that means that the amount of the raise still is not enough to cover the amount of the loss. So we have some work to do.
Let me ask you, in here, it's similar to the insurance, how much insurance we got for BTW in this budget?
How much insurance for BTW? It should be on one of those other sheets. But it's gonna be part
But
of
it won't be
benefits.
separated out as
But does anybody know what we got insurance wise?
For BTW, I can tell you
we
what
have
the total
an executive
benefits.
session.
Oh, yeah.
Discuss that.
That's a total benefit, that's a total, each. But I'll show you. Okay. We see for the total foundation program of $174 million compared to $172 million in 2018. That's about a $1.3 million difference. Now, what we are happy to see is that the state did put a little bit more money for teachers, for teacher material and supplies, because we know teachers have been buying a lot of supplies out of their own pockets. So we see $536 per teacher to buy materials and supplies, and we see an amount for technology and library enhancement as well.
Now, the technology, is that per teacher or per student, the 300?
That's teachers.
Okay,
That's
and then
right.
ADM is the student,
Yes,
right?
ma'am. Yes, ma'am. Now, although it's $300 for technology per teacher unit, what that means though is that the school itself will have to come up with a committee, and that committee will determine how they are going to expend those monies. It's not that each teacher's gonna get the $300. We saw that on the foundation program here, we see a total of $174 million that the state has budgeted for us. Now, I stated earlier that all districts, in order to participate in the state's foundation program, have to put up what is called a foundation match. I think that amount was it 24 million something. So if you were to add that 24 million to this 149 million, that's exactly what, that should come up to that 174. Now, this $149,520,000, that's the exact amount that the state is going to give us. So they're not gonna give us the 174 million there, although that says state, because it says state and local funds, which means this is the state foundation dollars that they'll give us, which is the $149 million, but they're requiring us to put up that $24 million as a local match in order to participate in the state's foundation program.
Okay, it's not there where you see the technology coordinator.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, last year we got rid of the technology coordinator, which I still don't know why we did that, but, we were paying him 42,711. Why did we hire somebody more?
Well, I think we were probably paying more than 42,711. The state says, what the state is saying, this is all we're gonna give you towards the salary of a technology coordinator.
So they are giving us more money.
No, they're giving us less money.
Okay, so why are we?
Well, they're giving us
paying-
more money this year towards the salary of a technology coordinator. But what I'm saying is that the state is saying, we feel that technology is so important to school districts. So we're gonna provide an allocation for you. See, they didn't provide this allocation, about 10 years ago. They just did this over the last, several years. But what they're saying, we think technology is important for school systems, so we're gonna provide an allocation for you to go towards the salary of a technology
So
coordinator.
if we had kept the guy that we got rid of, he would have been making that 55.
We would apply that towards his salary, but now whoever is assuming that responsibility, whether it's the technology coordinator, technology supervisor, whomever, we're gonna apply that amount towards his or her salary. But the other way is not enough. A technology coordinator, a technology director is gonna make 70, 80, 90, whatever $1,000 costs. I mean, it's just a very competitive position. In other words, although I do understand, but the state funding is just not enough. I mean, it's just not enough. Transportation, we see operation transportation, we see we're losing about $765,000 in transportation funds for fiscal year 2019. That's $765,000. How do we make that up? Because we still have the bus drivers. Still have buses, still have to be maintained, still have to buy fuel. So how do we make that up? But what we've done this year, and it's just a Band-Aid effect, ladies and gentlemen. There are some monies that was collected from the sale of old buses. So we made some of that makeup there in that particular fund source as one-time revenue. And we all know what happens with one-time revenue.
Go away.
Yes, it goes away. And the second, we use a little bit of money from monies that were collected from field trips. And those monies does not come that often. We may get maybe $20,000 or $30,000 a year. But we're talking about over $765,000. So how do we make that up after this year? The one-time funding is gone. So that's another concern. At-risk dollars, we see about $911,000. Career Tech O&M, we see a loss of about $14,000. Again, total state funds, this is the actual amount that we will receive from the state for fiscal year 2019, $168,672,000. And there's our foundation match, along with our capital purchase match. Other funds that we have in the general fund, I'm gonna speed up a little bit, Mr. President, is okay. I know you guys have another obligation. We see total federal revenues of $298,000. We received just a small amount of money of federal dollars in the general fund. Most of that is ROTC dollars that we receive. Then we have a breakdown of our various tax amounts that add up to the $54,723,000. Other revenues and other fund sources, you see indirect costs of $2.1 million. Indirect cost is just a small administrative fee that our general fund assess to our federal funds in order to run and operate those particular programs. So that's what that is. Transfers in of $640,000. These are monies that the schools transfer into our general fund to pay for several different expenditures. There are some things that the schools do at the school level, but the district has to process those expenditures. So the schools transfer in those dollars to our general fund to be able to do that. Yes, sir.
On the revenue, local revenues, if my math is right, it's about 50-50 between what we get from gas and sales, gasoline tax, sales taxes, and then ad valorem. It's almost an equal split, 26,000.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. So I almost said something, but I'm over that one. There we see a breakdown of our expenditures. We see instructional service expenditure. We see that the monies are going towards the classroom, basically. We see over $185 million of the $231 million going to the classroom. That's over 80, going for the support of the classroom, to support the classroom. That's over 80% of the total fund. And then we just have a pie chart of how those expenditures are broken down. Of course, we see about almost 81% of those total expenditures being instructional services. And I have to say that in most school districts, what I've seen is that instructional service expenditures usually run between 68 to 71%. And I also want to just point out that as far as general administrative, we're way under 4%. The State Department always have stated that if a school district general administrative expenditures is 5% or more, then you have problems. You are too top heavy as far as administrative expenses. But we are kind of up there in instruction and instructional support at 80% compared to 71%. And of course, again, this is that depressing slide showing our total.
Go back and say that.
Sure.
I'm not, you said we're up in,
Instructional.
and wait, and give me those figures again, because I'm.
Usually in most districts that I've seen, instructional expenditures usually run between 68 to 71%.
And we're at what?
We're at 80.7%.
Off of the 80% instructional as compared to other, basically what that just says is we don't have enough money.
Right,
That you've got to cover that expense, and we're
Right.
so short everywhere else, it's just taking a bigger chunk.
right, because the instruction is taking such a large chunk.
Right.
Yes. So you're not having enough money for
Other things.
operation and maintenance in some of the other areas.
Can you give me an example, just some examples of what is instructional?
Instruction will include the salaries and benefits of all of our teachers, salaries and benefits of all of our principals, all of our counselors, all of our librarians, assistant principals, those individuals who may not be classroom teachers, but they support teachers. They go out and support teachers. It also would include the nurses and
Would parent liaisons be that?
parent liaisons would be instructional support. Yes.
So, are the parents in the general fund or are they out of federal program?
You got most of the parents are out of the federal program, which is special revenue. This is general fund.
So take care of me to come back to that.
We don't have a lot of them in general fund.
They're out of federal.
That's the principal's decision.
Back to the depressing slide. Total revenues, about $221 million were projected for 2019. Expenditures, about $231 million. You see our excess of revenues, over expenditure, a negative $9.7 million. Of course, that's what the deficit is. Fund balance beginning of the year, $18.9 million. We see our ending fund balance, and we see our required estimate fund balance for 2019, $19,258,000. Again, Ms. Stone, you say you learned that the total expenditures divided by 12, that's what gives you that required fund balance.
So why does that seem to be going up when if our student enrollment is dropping? Why does that the fund balance seem to be going up?
Well, expenditure, as I stated earlier, the expenditures are basically increasing, and while the funding is pretty much remaining stagnant. Expenditures are increasing. I mean, you still got your utilities, you still got those same level of expenditures for the most part. Some are increasing to some degree.
So really, I mean,
in looking at this pie chart that Dr. Roller and I have been looking at, it's those other pieces of the pie that are on blue that they're gonna continue to increase.
Yes.
Because of our roof,
Right.
things like that.
Yes. Yes.
And like, the bus route, you know, you
Right.
may not have to send children on the bus, but you still gotta run that route.
Right.
And you gotta have bus route there.
Well, education is not expensive, yeah.
Okay, special revenue fund, of course, we see, there, again, the majority of those funds are federal funds. It also includes child nutrition and local school public funds. We see the $46 million, or $47 million, we could go ahead and say, is basically federal dollars. The $5 million is local school, public dollars, and child nutrition also have some, bring in some revenue from the selling of lunches and breakfast and so forth. Most of our students are free and reduced, but you have some kids that pay for a la carte and so forth. Now, we do see the fund balance in federal and special revenue. We see we're projecting an increase of $853,000. That is mainly child nutrition and local school account, local schools. That's what that increase is due to. And of course, there's a breakdown there of our federal, our special revenue funds, and a pie chart of those revenues. We also have a comparison here of the majority of our federal program funds. We do see a drop in our Title I of over $400,000 and a drop in Title II of over $500,000.
Mr. Roberts, do you know what the percent of Title I funds goes to personnel? I don't think you can go with it.
I'll get it for you. Somebody write that down, please. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Keaton, I will just say this, that I've already identified some areas in which I can see we can be a little more efficient in. And so we're gonna be addressing a whole lot of things coming up. Dr. Moore and I will be talking and have already been talking about some things. So we do see some areas that we'll be addressing. These are the other funds, of course, in special revenue other than federal funds. We see the state grants that we receive. Again, I think I stated that local revenues are basically local school public funds and look at CMP data sales. Other fund sources CMP pass through. That general fund transfers over to child nutrition, help child nutrition pay their benefits, salary benefits. And there we see those expenditures and the special revenue fund. We see the majority of those expenditures are auxiliary services. Those are child nutrition services. Pretty much the payment of salary and benefits for our lunchroom staff, also all the food and just pretty much the care of the entire cafeteria staff. We also see instructional services about $18 million to teachers and so forth, instructional support, principals, librarians, counselors, and so forth, $10.6 million. And then we just have a pie chart breakdown of those expenditures, which is going to be made up mainly of instructional and auxiliary. And as I stated, there will be an increase in our fund balance in the special revenue, about $853,000. Majority of that will be local schools and child nutrition. Debt service fund, pretty much the debt service fund, we transfer money from capital projects fund to debt service in order to pay our long-term principal and interest debt. And that's what that side, revenues derived from term transfer.
If you go back to that last slide where it says total revenues and other fund sources, the last row, right before, yep.
Okay.
My question is, so what's other fund sources? Can you give me an example of what other fund sources?
Yes, other fund sources would be like.
I put county commission, but I'm just, you know.
No ma'am, no ma'am. That would be like pre-K.
Okay.
Pre-K revenues. And this year, well, I think that we got some last year too. We did receive some funds for pre-K from the federal government as well. got about I think we get about $300,000 from the federal government to help support pre-K too.
That's just where we started, it's not.
Yeah, well, it's not enough, especially after that first year.
Yes.
So, because then you still have the teacher and an aide, and you're required to have a playground, and the playground costs about close to $30,000 itself. So, and then the classroom, you go to the classroom, so it's quite a bit. The debt service, again, we just transfer the money from capital projects to debt service to pay that debt. So there's no fund balance there. Capital projects fund, of course, as we stated, capital projects fund are basically funds that we utilize to build, renovate, repair schools. We can let Mr. Anderson talk about his need there. Of course, we see that about $6.9 million is left after we transfer money over to debt service. We also require, as I stated, that we have to fund match in order to participate in the capital projects fund. We receive a total of about $9 million, but we have to put up over $2 million, just like we have to put up over $24 million to participate in the state's foundation program. Well, $2 million to participate in the state's capital projects program.
Is this money before or after DPW? What we spend, does this include the rebuilding of DPW?
No, it doesn't.
Does not?
It doesn't. No.
That's coming later.
Just have the expenditure out of debt service. That $2 million fund balance at the end of the year, we're reserving that to pay some additional long-term debt. Because we do have another long-term debt, a state requirement, there's something called QZAR bonds, you all know about.
Birmingham.
Yeah, but you.
You
But of course,
got it.
right. But of course, you're not allowed to budget that as principal on the books at this time. You have to have those funds reserved, so that's what that $2 million is reserved for. Questions? Mr. President?
We appreciate, once again,
Yes,
your
sir.
thorough presentation, Mr. Price. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
I have one.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a couple, I'll just ask one, because I know we're gonna go through. But when you go back to the back where it says supplemental information, proposed sheet, I'm looking at the Montgomery County Board of Education, and it has career tech director.
Yes, ma'am.
Where are you, what page is it?
If you go back, okay, go to section 6, page 2. I guess so, I look at career tech, I guess as impact, and I'm not understanding why we have 5 career tech directors.
We don't have 5, we have 1.
Why is it just 5?
Based on what the state allocates to us,
Oh,
it's based on, it's still, everything that is earned is still based on student population. So based on our district, our number of students, we earn 5 career tech directors. Now, that doesn't mean we have 5 career tech directors, but that means we may have 1 director, you may have a coordinator in one area of program, a coordinator in another area, and coordinators in different areas. And really, and I kind of hate to stay called that career tech director, to be honest with you. Because
yeah, and that's why I was like, what is that?
Right.
And when I knew we just have impact, and, I'm talking to people that are upset that, they're missing teachers, or they, like, BTW had 3 dance teachers, and now they're down to 1, and I'm like, how do we, it just didn't compute for me, so that's.
Right. Yeah, but that's what that is. So, in fact, a lot of times, the amount of money you get for that, what they call career tech director, they get a little bit more than the salary of a teacher. So it's not all that much. That's why I think it could be a little misleading too, so.
And will you get me the percentage of it, just don't forget the Title I?
Yes, ma'am, personnel on Title I.
Personnel.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I think we have one from the audience.
Okay, sure.
Yes, my question is, I'm looking at the supplemental for Jeff Davis High School. My question is, I know the ADM is from the previous year, but at the bottom, you all have projected employees, school/cost centers. How is that projected? Used?
Can I see what
Are you looking at 1762?
Oh, this right here, okay. That's the number of employees that we're paying out of each of those funding sources.
Right, so do this number carry over for the next year? Cause I was looking at
Well,
2018.
That's gonna depend
and we
on,
had,
that's gonna depend on what JD earned for next year, as to whether that's gonna carry over to next year. But we'll look at what, Jeff Davis earned based on student population for this year, and based on that, we'll determine what the staffing would be for next year.
okay. The reason I was asking, I looked at 2018 and we had projected, 1,764, we ended up with 1,762, so there's a difference. And another thing, with the schools that close and transfer teachers to other locations, how does that affect?
Well, it'll be calculated, it will be.
It's already calculated and
Yes.
the money's transferred, so you
Yes.
don't have any problems with them getting?
They'll get their pupil material and supply, they'll get that $300 allocated for technology, they'll get that amount, $96.14 allocated for library enhancement, they'll get that $90 allocated for professional development. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and one last question.
Okay.
On the, classroom instructional support, I know at the top we got 107 teachers and 63, I'm assuming you're rounding up to 108,
Okay,
because you can't have a fraction of a
of a
person.
teacher.
It reduced the teacher like they did at Park.
Well, I know like teaching, you know, do like a half here, half there. That's true, but would you split the resources from two different schools? If you have them half and half, would you give them half of the money for these
Yeah,
students?
if you
and half the
have
money
a
in the other
teacher
schools?
at two different schools, yes, the money will be split between those two schools. The allocation will be, let me put it this way, the allocation will be split between those two schools.
Okay. And I am having a little difficulty finding the rounding. Sometimes you round on the front end, and then sometimes you round on the back end, so the numbers are not matching for me. Is that something that general accounting principle you speaking of?
That's a form that's done by the state.
Okay.
It's calculated by the state. It's because you got 730,000 students in the state of Alabama. So there are going to be some roundings in those various
I
areas.
understand about rounding, but normally you wouldn't swap. Because it makes a difference in the money.
You
If you
have
round
to,
before and after.
okay, you have to show me exactly what you're speaking of.
I think, Mr. Watts, you said that information came, the state presented that, so that would be something in the hands of the state, not your hand in order to present.
Yeah, but it might affect your budget, every penny helps. Just,
It would be very minute.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Would be like very minute.
Yes, sir.
My question, yeah.
My question is, we're still under state takeover, right?
That's my understanding.
Intervention.
Mr. Rosa or?
We're still under intervention. And so, all of last year, we were told that we had to sell Georgia Washington because we had to have, the amount in reserve. So now, are you gonna assure us that you're not gonna take this 9 million shortage out of that reserve? Because we put that in there to have till Jesus come back.
Yes, sir, again.
Are you planning on taking the 9 million shortage out of the reserve that the State Department and Advanced Ed penalized us on? So you're not gonna bother that, because when they get back in December, we want to have that reserve to show them that we are making progress?
With a short answer, the answer is no, I cannot promise that. We intend to do any and everything we could to meet the operational needs of this district, which means, number one, meeting payroll. And so if we see that we're projecting a $9.8 million fund balance at the end of the year, that's possible that there could be some cash shortfall somewhere. So we're gonna be thinking a whole lot, on a whole lot of ways to do different things. So no, sir, I can't promise you that.
So, Mr. Chairman, just to elaborate and give some additional feedback to the gentleman's question, the selling of the property was an infusion of cash. When you look at your, what you have in reserve, that's your savings account, all right? So just like on your monthly bill paying, when you spend more that month than you made, you go get some out of your what?
Reserve.
Your savings account. And so we take that infusion that we got from the sale of the property to meet our shortfalls every month. And so he cannot tell you that that money will be in reserve still in December, because as we continue to have shortfalls for monthly payroll, we go and dip into our savings and we pay it. That's our reserve. So we will meet our obligations, and as long as your 80% of your funding is going to the staffing, that's your number one priority every month. You've got to make payroll, Mr. Chairman.
Any others? Okay, our next item on the agenda will be in the need a motion to move into executive session.
Could I ask one more question? Could I ask one more question before we go? Well, I know, but you all said we had a budget hearing.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. I was talking to her.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just heard.
I didn't make you
We
hear.
had just skipped something out.
Skip something.
Right. Is there any law that says the general public can't know how much we gonna get for the school that burned down?
Oh, we have no problem. In fact, we're meeting with the insurance company tomorrow.
Okay.
But absolutely, now,
So,
let me just say this. There are about 6 or 7 different, how many categories is there? There's about 6 different categories in one area and about 4 or 5 different categories on the other area. And there is a top amount in each of those areas. So, but we will let you know what those amounts are, sure.
But I will say it's not enough to get anywhere close to building a new school.
Not even close.
We understand that. They in a good school now. They can stay there.
Okay, but we'll let you know the insurance. All right.
They learning now, so they can stay there. We'll just upgrade them.
Mr. Chairman, I think we need to go to,
Yeah.
Dr. Moore, was there a vote?
We are,
Okay.
consider for approval, need a motion.
I recommended we advance their consulting services statement of work.
Mr. President, I move that we approve Advanced Consulting Services statement of work.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second that we accept superintendent's recommendation for the Advanced Ed Consultant Services Statement of Work. Is there any discussion? Those who are in favor, let's see by a show of hands. It is 6 opposers, the same, 1 opposes.
Okay, so I recommend approval of the FY, scratch the I, 2019 budget. I'm used to saying FYI.
Yeah,
Mr. President, I
2019
move,
budget.
Mr. President, I move that we approve the fiscal year 2019 budget.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second that we approve the superintendent's recommendation for the FY 2019 budget. Any discussion? Those who are in favor, let's see by show of hands. How many? Come on now. 5. Opposers, the same? 2. Okay.
Okay, it passed, so tomorrow or sometime soon, we'll be sending this to the State Department.
The next item on our agenda is the executive session. We need a motion to move into executive session.
About 10 minutes.
About 10 minutes. 10 minutes.
Mr. President, are we gonna have a vote coming out?
No, we won't have a vote. No.
There's nothing to vote on.
Nothing to vote on. Need a motion.
We had I thought they said there was a motion on the table.
A motion to move into executive session.
I move for a motion, to move into executive session.
Second.
It has been moved and properly second that we go into executive session. Will take about 10 minutes. Any discussion? Those who are in favor, let's see by a show of hands. It is unanimous. We'll be moving into executive session at this time. We should return in about 10 minutes.
Go ahead.
Back in session.
He's here, yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay, thank you. We finished the executive session. At that time, our next meeting will be Tuesday, September 25th, 2018, 5 p.m. Board meeting, central office. This meeting is now adjourned.